This is the Lazer Loop, a theory created and proposed by Scottish YouTuber Lazer, link in the description down below. The theory is based off the idea that Russian or Russia strong memes are created so that people think Russian vehicles are good, that a war will happen and Russian tanks and other vehicles prove to be inadequate. With time, people forget said war and then the loop rinse and repeats. It is a solid loop and an accurate one. One such example is the modern-day Russo-Ukrainian War. Leading up to the Russian invasion back in February 2022, everyone was utterly shitting themselves over how rugged and reliable Russian technology was and how Russia could steamroll all of Europe in a matter of weeks. That Western militaries were using unreliable, expensive technologies that have no proven concepts. This is not true. The media danced to the tunes of these so-called reformists, claiming the superiority of guns over missiles. The lessons of Vietnam and the lessons of Korea are chants sung by these idiotic, misinformed military reformists. I am air quoting, but you can't see. Men like John Boyd, Pierre Spray, Mike Sparks, and so many others championed the belief that the gun always beats the missile. They mainly used the example of the performance of the U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, and U.S. Navy F-4 Phantom II, a jet fighter in Vietnam, also one of my favorites. During the Vietnam War, U.S. fighters operated poorly without the attached gun, meaning that the F-4's unreliable missile system that failed to shoot down a target, they were left vulnerable to less advanced MiG-15s and MiG-17s. They used the moniker to criticize aircraft such as the F-15, F-16, the 22, and most tragically, the F-35 Lightning II. They also use this in reference to all U.S. military equipment, not just the aircraft, which is yet to see full-fledged combat against a near-peer adversary. Often claiming Soviet and later Russian equipment is rugged and reliable, how the T-90s and T-72s would be able to outperform the brand new M1 Abrams tank. Not true at all. Or how reliable the AK family of assault rifles are. This often goes on to Russia getting involved into a war. That's when Russian equipment will often greatly underperform. Being defeated by outdated enemy equipment and even small numbers of modern Western equipment, as seen in Ukraine, are enough to inflict extreme losses upon the Russian army. The most well-known so far and best quality example of this is again Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Soon it is to meet its 1-year anniversary if it hasn't already by the time I release this. Leading up to the invasion, I remember seeing all these YouTubers and TikTokers and self-proclaimed experts talking about how Russia would steamroll Ukraine in hours, how they would conquer Kyiv in a matter of a few days at most. And it didn't, as you very much well known. As you are doubtlessly aware, Russia completely failed to seize Kyiv, barely making it that far into Ukraine in the first place. Russia lost up to 80,000 troops, including over 1,450 tanks, 13 generals, and so many more lower officers that it's getting ridiculous, at least at the time of recording. With such heavy casualties of the Russian army, as well as the failure to maintain even basic logistics, many are asking why. Why is Ukraine seemingly beating the Russian army despite being drastically outnumbered and outgunned? Well, there's a few basic answers for this and many, many more complicated answers you can't really fit into a YouTube video like this. But don't shit yourself, I'll explain as simply as I can without getting it wrong. To my limited knowledge, I'm not qualified. I'm a high school student. The Russian army is incredibly incompetent. The Russian army has suffered from constant bouts of corruption and incompetence ever since the fall of the Soviet Union and even before that. While on paper, Russia has a military budget of $66 billion, the fourth biggest military budget around the world, last time I checked, most of that money goes to making sure the divisional quartermaster gets the newest hot tub. I wish I could be in this position right now. While corruption is something commonly associated with the Pentagon, and not necessarily wrong, it has been a huge and dangerous problem in the Russian and Chinese armies, and armed forces in general, have been suffering from it. While it has less it's been less obvious to the public. The Chinese armies have shown equal, if not worse, amounts of corruption than the Russian army. While not innocent of corruption amongst its ranks, Western armies have what I call affordable corruption, which is where a group may be corrupt, but it does not dangerously affect or impact the effectiveness of a fighting force. In Ukraine, Russian forces were sent with outdated rifles such as the M1891 Mosin Nagant, PPSH 41s, and other World War II Cold War era weapons. Russia is starting to reactivate old T-64s and early T-72s. And with how Russian logistics are, I wouldn't be half surprised if they walked up to Kablinka, took a bunch of T-34s, painted a giant Z on it, and pushed them into service.
Hey, this is post-production Crimson Snow. At the time of recording, I had not breached the news that T-34s had already entered Russian service again. So I just want to clarify that up. Oh my god, I was right.
Russia's total failure to maintain its military logistics has been one primary reason why Russian forces are in retreat currently. This all runs back to the Lazer pig loop. Like I said earlier, in the months leading up to the 2022 invasion, the general public spent their days utterly panicked over the sheer power and reliability of Russian Cold War and modern technology. But the Lazer pig loop and the Russia-Ukraine war have proven Russian technology and weapons are not all they're made out to be. Russian vehicles and equipment are often just left in storage with nobody checking in on them for years, sometimes decades. If you don't turn over or quote-unquote maintenance equipment that is in storage every once in a while, military equipment becomes old and degraded. Not only does this mean it will have a shorter service life, but it will also dramatically increase the weapon's rate of failure, and it endangers the lives of all its operators, which is clearly, I don't think I have to explain this, a bad idea. With the horrible maintenance standards of even active military ships, God knows what state the Russian stored vehicles are in. One person may look upon Russia's storage of AK-47 assault rifles, Russia's standard issue assault rifle, for a long time. The most well-known facts people know about the AK-47 is its Jurassic reliability. Ideas that you can drag it through the mud and it'll still work are known to the public. While the AK-47 is reliable, it is still an assault rifle. Get any amount of sand, mud, dirt, or any other materials inside that gun, and it'll jam in the same way as any other. The 47 is also inferior to later AK-74s and AK-12s currently being used on both sides. Now, don't take this as a liberal hates Russia just case. I love studying Russian military history as well as the Russian culture of the 1900s during the Viking Age. I mixed that up, that's the 900s. I simply do not approve of Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Even saying all of Russia's propaganda were true, they're not. You can't simply invade another country. And no, it is not a war to denazify Ukraine. This is war of territorial expansion. This is a war to reclaim the power of the Russian Empire and Soviet Union before it. Each blunder Putin makes to countries paint a black mark on the world. Now, don't get me wrong, the West is not entirely innocent of unjust conflicts fought by incompetent leaders. For example, U.S. tactics during Vietnam were not fit for the mission. The U.S. made mistakes of fighting a numbers war, which gave the Viet Cong guerrillas the ability to rally public support in the North and South, or in the conflict in Iraq, where the U.S. invaded a country on dubious claims which turned out to be false. But the big difference is that in the U.S. did at least try to make a justification that would make sense. Oh, and Americans could protest the war without being carted off to prison by plainclothes police officers. Or did you forget about that? Overall, the Lazer pig loop is an underrated and somewhat important piece of knowledge. It portrays an important cycle of knowledge that is often forgotten about, while seemingly made by an unimportant, poorly known YouTuber. I mean, no offense. It displays a greater knowledge of history despite his claims, which, really, my dude, you should be complimenting yourself more. You're smart.
Well, this has been Crimson Snow, signing off. Goodbye. You could leave now. I want to go to bed. Leave me alone. You know I'm leaving. I'm done with this shit. See you next week. Well, stupid.